We have two goals today. The first is to introduce you to the outcome measurement process, and second, to demonstrate the value of outcome measurement to increasing community food security.
So the first thing I want to do is start off with a number. Oh. That number. So I want you to imagine that you have $2.46 million in a budget to invest in community food security in a city of your choice. And you can actually take a moment to think about how you do that. After you invest that money, how would you know if your investment had an impact? And then later on, how would you learn how to make better investments in the future? The food bank in Arizona is asking itself this question as it invests $2.46 million in the Community Food Resource Center annually, which consists of 6 programs and 25 radical, talented staff. We've worked primarily with 2 of those programs. Mine was the Home Garden Cooperative. This is my first day at work, which primarily does 3 things. It teaches gardening workshops free for the public, demonstrates best practices for desert gardening in its demonstration garden, and builds and installs home gardens for folks who qualify as low income.
And I worked at Las Milpitas de Cottonwood, which is a community farm run by the food bank in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Tucson. And it was started 3 years ago as a result of a community visioning process. And we now have 90 gardening plots for folks to grow their own food. And with bees, compost, a composting toilet, chickens, water harvesting, water catchment, we serve as a really great demonstration site in desert permaculture design for the many school groups and volunteer groups who visit the farm each year. And since we invest really heavily in leadership development and skills training, we've also become a site for community organizing, and the neighborhood has had some really impressive wins, even just in the 3 years since the farm began. So before delving into our assessment processes, I wanted to start with a story to demonstrate the type of evidence farm staff and program staff had at the food bank that they were having the intended impact in the community. So 3 years ago, one of our current gardeners, was afraid to even set foot on the farm. She was finally convinced when her son told her that his friends were playing there and all his friends' parents had applied for plots, so she decided to apply for a plot. She was unemployed at the time and continues to have difficulty finding a job. But since starting gardening at Milpitas, she's not only improved her gardening skills, improved her diet, started jogging, and started feeding her family healthy fruits and vegetables. She's also been able to sell the produce and eggs that she grows at Milpitas at the farmers markets run by the food bank. And because of the leadership skills she's built in the community she's formed at Milpitas, she's successfully ran and was elected to serve as co-chair of the local neighborhood association, where she's now advocating for more community green spaces like Las Milpitas. So that's just one gardener's story. And that was basically what farm staff had before Brian and I worked with them to set up a program assessment process. And without program assessment, we weren't able to understand why some gardeners have success stories like this one and others drop out after a single season. So program assessment helps us understand the extent to which we're reaching our impact, who we're having an impact with, and how we can change our programs so that we can increase our reach and improve our programming.
So just to sort of crystallize some of those questions Jenny was just asking into 4 values of outcome measurement, we've listed a few things here. Equity, who's our program benefiting most? Are there disparities based on race, class, gender, spoken language, geography, etc.? And if so, how can we begin to understand them and address them? Outcome measurement helps us maintain accountability to the communities we work with and on behalf of, making sure that the work we're doing aligns with their vision for their community, and that we're doing what we say we're going to do. The continual nature of outcome measurement provides ongoing feedback, which helps us learn from our successes and failures and grow as a program. And it helps us make informed decisions about budget priorities, staff time, and use of resources. So thus far we've been using the word impact pretty loosely, but as Eileen often says, to measure something you have to know what you're going to measure. That's not exactly what you say. But we've heard many different iterations of it.
It's difficult to set your goals when you don't know what they are.
Thank you. anyways, so we had to start by defining impact. And so at this point, I should just make clear we're going into the process of outcome measurement, and that always starts with defining your impact. But a major question is, who defines impact? Is it just program staff, or is it all stakeholders in the program? And Jenny's going to talk a little bit more about that process.
So,
one more thing. We're also, as we go through this, we created 2 separate program assessments, but we're going to just pull examples from each of ours as we go through this process today.
So, in light of that, both Brian and I engaged in participatory processes with many community stakeholders to understand what outcomes all of our stakeholders were interested in measuring. So in my case, at Las Milpitas, we held a focus group with the gardener leadership, and I held informal interviews with all our stakeholders, volunteers, gardeners, program staff, management staff at the food bank, and even several board members to understand what outcomes they were interested in measuring at Las Milpitas. And as you all might already know, we were able to learn something that may be pretty obvious, but yeah, many things grow in the garden that were never sown there. So it's not just access to healthy food, it's also the sense of community that develops, the leadership skills that folks are developing, and even outcomes related to mental health. And these are all things that came up as a result of this process. So we generated, after talking with all these folks, a 10-page list of outcomes that folks were interested in measuring. And luckily, we were able to prioritize that list through a logic model, which is a visual depiction of how a program works. So I don't want you to strain your eyes here. We're going to move quickly. But in short, a logic model details the program assumptions and relates the program's activities and inputs to the outcomes we hope it's happening. And this, as I said, is a bit complicated, and it's mainly useful for program staff. So we're going to move on. Both Brian and I created simplified logic models for communication use with different audiences.
Yeah, and so just to sort of give you a sense of the flow of these logic models and clarify some of the definitions of these categories for you, I'm going to briefly walk through this. So logic models, I always start with actually something that's not on here, which is program inputs, which are the staff knowledge, staff time, funding, physical resources, and infrastructure that go into a program. The activities are what program staff do. So in this case, teach workshops or design and build gardens. Outputs are the direct product of those activities and can usually be counted easily, so things like number of workshops or number of gardens. We hope that, according to program theory, those outputs lead to short-term outcomes, which are often changes in attitude or gains in knowledge. In this case, things like nutritional knowledge or education and gardening skills. And then those lead to midterm outcomes, which are things we're even more interested in measuring, which are changes in behavior. So things that relate to physical health or resource conservation. As we get further along this logic model, though, towards midterm and long-term outcomes, we also have to acknowledge that there are other factors that can influence these. And so we can't claim to directly cause reduced obesity and diabetes or reduced poverty. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that lead into that. But we really are interested in measuring these midterm outcomes because they're crucial to the long-term outcomes which lead to our impact. And consequently, outcome measurement tends to focus on measuring short-term and midterm outcomes and relying on this program theory that if those are happening, those long-term outcomes are going to happen as well. So hopefully that's clarified the sort of different components. It's worth mentioning that these are useful not only for program staff as a way of sort of understanding the impact of their program, but also to guide them in the process of what they're going to measure and track, and also as communication tools for external audiences. So regarding the measurement of these outcomes, first thing you have to do is create indicators or metrics. And oftentimes you can borrow those from established research. So the first two on here, the change in healthy diet or change in census community, came from established research. But oftentimes too in innovative programs you'll have to create or improvise or modify existing tools. And because we also want this process to be useful to all stakeholders, including participants, and be a positive process for them, we don't want to overly burden them with 10-page surveys or things that are going to trigger painful experiences. And so, as an example of something we did along those lines, we modified the USDA food security questionnaire to be 3 questions instead of 10. We feel like that was enough information to operate as a program. And does that mean that we couldn't publish this data in an academic journal? Yes. It's not going to be valid according to the USDA, but that's not the point. The point is to inform staff on an ongoing process and improve the program. So Jenny's going to talk about the last couple steps of outcome measurement.
So once we had associated metrics with each of the outcomes in the logic model, the next step was to create tools to facilitate data collection. So in my case, at Las Milpitas, we developed 4 different tools. The first is a seasonal gardener survey run through SurveyMonkey that gardeners will take twice a year for the entire duration of their time at Milpitas. And we'll be tracking changes in their attitudes, beliefs, values, and behaviors that are occurring as they're participating in the program. Second, we developed or changed our volunteer sign-in sheets so that we can capture data about volunteers and understand what they're experiencing either as one-time volunteers or as multi-time long-term volunteers at the farm. Third, we created a dot density survey to understand what perhaps one-time visitors to the farm for annual events like our fall festival are learning and experiencing while they're there. And finally, I created a suite of administrative tools for farm staff to measure outputs, such as the number of transplants distributed or the number of yards of compost produced, as well as outcomes that don't require gardener input. So that's things like improved soil quality or increased biodiversity. And you might, so this is where Brian and I ended our process. But there are 3 more steps in the data assessment process: data collection, analysis, and reporting. So we've put in place the tools that will help staff continue to do this. But neither program is really starting these last 3 steps until the coming growing season. And this underscores how long-term an investment outcome measurement really is. So now that we've walked you through the process of outcome measurement, we'll begin to close with our key learnings. So first, we learned what outcome measurement is not. With outcome measurement, we're not trying to demonstrate or prove the impact of our programs. Outcome measurement can't prove causation. We're trying to measure and count how much progress we're making towards the outcomes which we think lead to our long-term impact. Second, it does not need to stand up to the rigor or standards of academic research or academic evaluation. And third, as you by now may have picked up on, it is definitely not a short-term process.
So if that's what outcome measurement is not, this is what outcome measurement is. It's nuanced and long-term. It accounts for the nuanced ways that programs hope to achieve their goals and allows for the evolution of the process as the program itself evolves. It's valuable to all stakeholders, from providing positive feedback and encouragement to program participants or gardeners, all the way up to communicating the value of a program to funders. It's focused on improvement, not proof. So that process of ongoing feedback allows growth and reflection, and is best when it's done participatorily to maintain accountability, to ensure that the work is continuing to align with the community's needs and vision. And so I want to end today with what brings all of us here, which is justice. I hope we've sort of convinced you that outcome measurement is one way of ensuring that we're getting to a just and equitable society in the most effective and efficient manner possible with the resources we have. And in the process, maintains accountability to the communities we work with and allows us to learn alongside our partners.